Hello, everybody, and welcome to Getting APIs to Work. Today, we say hello to Cesare Pautasso. Hey, Cesare, how are you doing?
Hi, Eric. Good to see you.
Yeah, well, thanks for joining. So Cesare is a professor at the Software Institute at the University in Lugano in Switzerland, and he has come up with a way of how to visualize APIs. So today's, we'll do a little bit different things. We'll actually look at beautiful things, at beautiful APIs, and I really like this idea. So you published a book with beautiful API designs with API structure. Tell us a little bit more about the general idea before we start looking at some concrete examples.
Well, we started to do some research on API analytics, and we assembled a large collection of real-world APIs. And we had a problem. There's so much information in these open API descriptions that you find. And so how can we look at them and get an overview and try to see the essence or basically the main structure of an API?
And I think that's a very good point, right? OpenAPI is a rather complex specification. So there's a lot of information in there, and we're all used to this color-coded list of resources that we get in Swagger and other documentation tools, which is very useful, but it's kind of a minimal way of looking at it. So what did you approach as a better way, or let's say an alternative way of looking at the information that is in OpenAPI?
Well, what is special about open APIs is that they're based on the HTTP protocol, and the HTTP protocol has URLs for resources. So as opposed to classical APIs, which just are a bunch of flat list of methods, or maybe you have classes and methods. With web APIs, you have actually a hierarchical structure where you can sort of map the addresses of the resources that you expose on the web into a tree. And so that already gives you something that you can look at. And then attached to these paths, you have also the methods, the HTTP methods, which is unlimited. So you can color code them as most API documentation tools do. So we kept the same color coding, and we just visualized the structure tree of the API. And you would be amazed of the variety of structures that come out. So that's already a very simple encoding, very simple visualization. But when you apply it to the real world APIs, you will see there is lots and lots of variety.
And that's what you did. You applied it to real world APIs. So let's jump right in and look at some of the examples that you found. So here's the cover of the book that you published with all these real-world APIs. It's called Beautiful APIs, and I think it really is interesting to look at what the APIs look at. So let's jump into a discussion of some concrete APIs that you found and that you visualized, and we'll look at the structure of these APIs.
Okay, so here's the first example of an API structure. So you can see that the root of the API is over here, and then attached to it we have three top-level resources: the orders, the products, and the users. And that's already when you see two different ways that people use to design APIs. One of those is more like operation-oriented, where you just want to perform some operation. So you do a post, and then, for example, you want to log in, so you send your credentials, and then you get a token typically, or you want to sign up, so you register, and then you can log in later. The other part of the API is actually more interesting because it gives you access to the orders and the products catalog, and it presents it as a collection, right? So a collection is a resource. So you say there are my products, and what can you do with the products? You can get the list, or you can create new ones. So these are these two operations attached to the products. And by the way, you can do the same with the orders. You can also get the list of the orders, and you can create new orders. Once you have a specific order, then you have an identifier. So this is also part of the resource, right? In OpenAPI, you can use this convention with the curly braces and say this is a parametric path. And once you know the ID, and how do you discover the ID? Well, you can have access to the list. So the list contains the link, right? You follow the link, and then you can delete orders, or you can actually read more information about them. So you have this sort of master detail type of structure. And the same is true for the products. The difference between the orders is that you can read them and you can delete them, but you cannot change them. Whereas in this API, the products can actually be updated. So we have here the put method attached to them. So this is how you read these visualizations. Okay, the first part of the tree is just the visualization of the URLs, so the addresses as a set of paths, and then we sort of color coded, right? In white, so you see that this is a fixed path, and then in black there is a placeholder for a parameter, so you can see whether the API uses path parameters or not. Some APIs are actually just completely static in the structure, and others are parametric. And then attached to the leaves, right, we show the methods, the operations that can be performed on that path.
And that's the thing that I really like about this notation. Right? It's like, I think good visual notations always are very condensed. There's nothing in there that doesn't carry information value. And I think that is really something that you have achieved here. You see a lot of the URI structure that is important. You see all the HTTP methods, which are important, and everything is shown in a really short and very easy to grasp way. This example here is probably a very simple one, but already I think we can see how useful it may just be to look at your API that way. Let's move on and explore a little bit of the other things that you've seen. But before we do that, maybe a short question. So how many do you have in the book, like for people to browse through, just to explore in that book?
Well, in this book, we have about 100. Yeah, there is also other books where there is even more. But the whole collection is getting close. Because we are studying not just the API themselves, but also their history. So we also want to analyze how they change, how they grow, and we are getting close to 1 million commits of many different types of APIs. So there is,
and that's a teaser for the next video. Will be about the API evolution thing. I think that's also super interesting. But for today, we'll just stick with kind of those snapshots of APIs. So let's jump to the next one and see the kind of things that you can really quickly see when you look at these visualizations. So what's interesting about that one?
Okay, so this one, I selected it because it has the similar structure to what I explained before. But you can see that this structure really becomes a pattern. So a pattern is like a regular set of operations that you apply to different, you instantiate it, you apply to different concepts in your API. So for example, here we can see that there is a cluster, there are servers, there are roles, and all of those have exactly the same operations. And so they're all collections of servers, of clusters, of playbook configurations, and so on. We also see that APIs are not necessarily very regular. So there is a part which is the collection resources, and then we also have read-only resources. For example, playbook and permission are you just get information out of those, and there are APIs which are completely read-only. So you can only open data API. You can read information, but you cannot really change anything as a client. Then we also see that in this particular API, we do have users, right? And for some reason, users have a version inside. But what is interesting about the authentication is that in this case, we have the possibility to start a session with post and sort of log out with delete. In the previous example, there was no logout. And that's sort of an interpretation or something that people do. With HTTP, that's one of the challenges as a designer, right? You have a limited set of methods. You only have these colors that you can use to paint your API. And then the question is, how do you map arbitrary actions on those things, right? So in this case, we don't have explicitly any action in the resources. So I don't know if that's a good practice, right? You just say the resources are what the API gives you access to, and then all of the actions are implicit in the methods that you have. But there is also, I don't know if you want me to switch to another example.
Yeah, let's look at another one. I think it's just interesting to look through those and like you said, right, realize that there are certain patterns. And at least I think and that's I think that's one point that Arnaud Loré makes a lot, right? That at least your API should be consistent internally, like within itself. And that already you could tell, right, that at least has been achieved there, where there is this repeating pattern of how these things are designed. So that at least this internal consistency is a good thing. Here we have a very different way of how you can design an API. So what's happening here?
This one is the main resource is only one. So there is a container API, and then we see that we do have the creation operation, but as opposed to the previous cases, maybe I can zoom in there a little bit. The creation is actually the action itself is part of the resource, and then you attach the post method to it. So if you want to create a container, you have to post not on the container resource directly, but on the create sub resource. You can get the container in JSON format because you can get container/JSON. And then we still do have the identifier, right? So we have multiple containers, and each of those has an identifier. And what we can do directly on that identifier is to delete it. But we can do a lot more things on this container. And you can see basically a long list of actions. And they are all applied to a specific container because all of these actions are under the identifier. And what is particularly interesting here is that the designer, they have been doing some mapping between whether the actions are mutating the state of the resource or they are just read-only operations, right? So if you want to get the changes of the container, okay, you read the changes. You want to export it, you want to get the logs. So all of these are green because they are read-only operations. And then the other ones that, for example, you start or restart the container, you stop it. These are all post operations because they're mutating the state. So in this case, of course, they couldn't just do a post directly on the identifier of the container because there is so many different actions you want to do. And so they have been listing those actions explicitly. So that's another style that we find quite often, where the resource that some people argue should just describe what is the content that you make accessible, in this case becomes also an actionable resource. I don't know if you...
But again, I think here they went for this internal consistency at least. So for all of these operations that you have on that resource, they did pick one resource to define for it, and then they picked one of the HTTP methods. So again, whether you like this design or not is maybe a different issue, but at least there is an internal consistency to it. So I think that alone has some value to it. Otherwise, it probably would be really confusing to use. But this one has, and there's a bit of color coding in your book. So as long as they have a white background, you still kind of approve of them. I think that's the pattern there. So the white background ones at least are probably some design that some person might do, which makes sense in some shape or form. And then we also have a couple of other ones which maybe are not the greatest designs, and maybe they are things to still look at and learn from, but in the sense that maybe don't do it that way. So you also have a couple of black ones.
Yes. So let me show you the classical.
Classical black one.
Classical black one. Well, actually, it's not everything bad about this one. There's actually worse. So in this case, you notice that they only use one method because all of these operations have the post method, and this is typically found in what we call RPC style APIs. Okay, you just call the API and you have lots of calls that you can make. What is interesting here is that they also use the version 1 as a root. So in this case, I guess they already have some versioning practices in mind, right? That they will have another branch under version 2, for example. And we find, for example, APIs in the field that have like 6 different versions at the same time published. So this seems to be a common practice, right? You start the root of the tree, you put the version identifier, and okay, you could just have some RPC APIs are really simple. They're just a list of calls that you can make. This one already is adding a little bit of structure. Okay, so they realized with HTTP you can have a little bit of nesting, right? So, and maybe we even have an API under which we have a microservice architecture, right? Maybe there is the detail microservice, maybe there is the promote microservice. I don't know what's the underlying implementation, but maybe this structure helps to map this to the implementation. And then you can see that basically, one of the main reasons why this ended up on the dark side of the book is that there is this get. You want to get the list and you do a post request, right? So that one I couldn't really show it as a positive example. Although this example also has some good parts there.
I see. So this is what pushed it over the edge. It's like you're not using get. You should be using get. I think that's a fair point. But to some extent, I think when I look at this, it seems to me that even though there is structure in there, the structure isn't really helping all that much. You only have operations like on the very end of the structure. It always looks very regular. So in the end, to me, the structure it probably helps with understanding the API a little bit better, but it seems like a very anemic way of using the real HTTP design capabilities maybe that you would look for.
Yeah, also in this case, you notice that there is no parameters, right? All the nodes of the tree are white. That means that they are all just fixed strings. And I suppose the parameters, for example, this you want to like a certain video, you have to probably tell the API which video you're interested to like, and that's probably a parameter that you pass inside the post request. So these parameter level details, this is something that we didn't show in the visualization, right? We just stopped the paths and the methods. That's all.
Let's look at. I think you have another black one, right?
Yes, this is what we call our friend the crud. Because this is an example where you have a resource and then you can create, you can read, you can update, and you can delete, and you do this systematically, right? All of the resources in your API have exactly the same set of methods, and here we have the users, we have the orders, we have the products, and then we have the join between the orders and the product. So maybe behind this API you just have some SQL tables, and you have direct access to all the tables in your database. Or at least that's just a hypothesis. But
this one does look a little odd, I have to agree.
But at least, so the structure is flat. So this is a one-on-one mapping, right, between all the concepts and even the join between the concepts. So all the products is just an independent resource. And however, there is more than one method, right? So compared to the previous one where there was only post, at least here the designers have learned that they can also do the other 4 classical methods.
There's that. But then there's also this weird order product, which really looks like a rather strange design choice. But like you say, it's sometimes I like the way how you hypothesize about what may have been the reason to design it that way. And I think sometimes that's really interesting. On the other hand, I think that's also a good indication that if you just start thinking that way, if you look at this visualization and you start thinking, why is it like this? That's probably not a good sign, because I think in the end you shouldn't be let down that way, right? Like the domain problem should be the one that structures your API, and it should not be something where you think, why did they design it that way? There must be some explanation that's caused by the implementation. I think if you lead people down that path, it's not a great sign for your API design, I would say.
Yes, and then the question is also if designers would have been able to see it like this, would have spotted this issue. Right? Maybe they were sort of deep down into the code. They had a database to publish, and they didn't have a chance to get the big picture from far away.
That's a very good point. I really think, and that's the reason why we're here. I think that this visualization is very valuable to just give you that feedback in terms of what is it that I'm designing, and I am designing this space of HTTP resources that have certain methods associated with them, and it's really hard to think what this space looks like. It's like our typical tooling doesn't give us this capability, and that's what I really love about this beautiful APIs project, is that it's this ability to now really look at this space in a way that is very compact and may allow you to spot certain things that are maybe worth reconsidering. What you've done for the book is you went through public APIs, I think, right?
That's correct. Yes, they are API that are found on GitHub, Swagger Hub. They are all over the web. Yeah, but these are the developers, publishing those in open source repositories. Yeah,
and that's a good start. And I think that what makes it so fun to go through your book. But now, as you said, it might also be a good feedback for designers, and it might also be a great explanation for API consumers to actually look at an API like this. Now, if I want to look at my API like this, how can I do this?
Well, you get in touch, and then we will help you to visualize it like this. We do have various tools that can be used, and that's something that we're also interested to be able to do studies with developers that can see whether the visualization gives them useful feedback. Then maybe they can try it out with their own APIs. Yes, definitely.
So this means for everybody who wants to look at their API this way, get in touch with Cesare. He's looking forward to make your API maybe not beautiful, but at least visualized. And then it's up to you to decide how beautiful it is. And maybe it gives you good input for how to reconsider certain design decisions, or making it more coherent just within itself. And I think that's really, it's a fresh look at APIs that we typically don't have that way. And ideally, I would hope to see this view of APIs much, much more, and in documentation tools and in all the places where we are not really depending so much at the very detailed information, or all of the detailed information we find in OpenAPI, but more at this like glancing at the API and understanding it.
Yes, APIs can grow. They can grow to be very large and complex. And if you just have the plain documentation that you generate, or just the OpenAPI description source, it's difficult to see the overview, and typically you get lost in the details. And
I think for a lot of people in the API space, because they work so much with OpenAPI, for them at least, it kind of is readable, and they can look at it and get some overview of it. But it's not something where everybody else necessarily has the same kind of understanding of OpenAPI, I think. So this level of abstraction and making it visual, I think, is something that can help a lot, not just for API designers and developers, but also for everybody who's collaborating with them when it comes to design, and then what does this API do, and all these kind of questions.
Yes, we would. There is two main use cases for this, like you were saying. One is for helping beginners with the API to get the overview and to navigate within a large API. But also, we would love to see this adopted in the design process, right? That people can sketch the API and see it at this level before they flesh it out with more details, so they can get the structure right, and then they can add everything else.
Cesare, thank you so much for sharing these examples of beautiful APIs with us. I think it's something that hopefully will become more used in the API design practice. Ideally, I really would like to see it included in tooling, and then just as a way of making more sense of APIs. Do you have any plans on how to extend that work?
Well, we see this visualization, of course, could become more detailed, so include more information from the specification. For example, the data models, or more details about the requests and responses. But there is other challenges, like, for example, time and space. So how can you visualize APIs that have hundreds and hundreds of operations? And that's what we call the beautiful big APIs. And also the time. So how do APIs change over time? and that's also very challenging to show in a diagram, because you need the diagram will show you one commit, one version at a time, and we are doing research on how can we show the evolution over years, right? Sometimes you have APIs that are around for decades, and how can you show, there are some periods in which the APIs tend to grow, but there are also some periods where people cut the branches, and what is also possible with OpenAPI is to deprecate some of the operations, but we didn't find this used too much. So people I guess, are not familiar with that particular feature yet.
That is very good teaser. So coming up next will be our discussion on beautiful API evolution. I'm looking forward to that, because I think it's also something that is equally important, not just to understand APIs, but to understand how they evolve over time. And that'll be the next thing that we'll discuss.
I'm looking forward to that. Thank you, Eric, for hosting.
So do I.
It was a pleasure.
Yes, thanks a lot for being on the show. Thanks everybody for watching. I hope you liked the beautiful APIs. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. And looking forward to the next one then is beautiful API evolution. Until then, all the best. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.